to your Coaching to Confidence Tuesday at 2 o'clock series. We hope you are all doing well and enjoying this really lovely weather that we're having right now. It is so nice outside, although I am a fall baby, so I really wish it was 12 degrees colder, but we're very excited for the sunshine at least. So today I wanted to invite and welcome Michael Cairo, who is the manager of the West Loop Leasing Division, formerly Belmont Lakeview Leasing Division, now in West Loop. I thought there would be no one better to talk about how to convert renters into buyers. And I'm so excited to have him be able to talk with us about it. I'm going to keep myself muted for the most part. I'm going to chime in towards the end of every slide with Michael and kind of talk about it like that. You guys are welcome to put your questions in the chat. You're also welcome to raise your hand. That function is in the upper right-hand corner of your Teams view. It's literally a hand. You can click it, it'll raise your hand. It'll alert me that you have a question. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself, Michael, and you can go right on in.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Appreciate it. And welcome everyone to Converting Renters to Buyers. If anybody's ever been in a meeting with me, as Rachel mentioned, I definitely encourage participation. Obviously, all of our wonderful agents like yourselves out in the field, in the trenches, day to day, you put this to life. And, hopefully you have stories of converting renters to buyers yourself, which we would love to hear about when we get toward the end of the presentation. But stop me along the way, ask questions, as we mentioned, throw them in the chat, and we'll answer them as soon as possible. So without further ado, let's go to our next slide here. So for me, and for those who know me with the rental division, it all starts with education. I've always trained on the philosophy of being more of an educator.
Hold on one second. Sorry.
Sure.
So I don't think when you moved your slide, it moved anyone else's.
Oh,
so yeah, I think that's how you shared it.
Here, let me see if I can share another way here. 1 second. Thanks for catching that.
That's probably why it gave me the ability to navigate myself.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, let's see if we can get that going with this. You know what? I'm just going to share the whole presentation here. Let's see. Okay, let's try this, and let me just open another PowerPoint window here.
I bet this will work better because I don't have any. There you go. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and then just call out to me, right, because I have to close the team screen. So any anybody in the chat or questions, just call out to me. I'll
let you know.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So it all starts with education, as I mentioned. I've always trained on the philosophy of being educators and not just salespeople. Some renters assume that they can't afford to buy or that they won't qualify for a mortgage or a good interest rate, but it is up to you to explain the alternative. So get in the educator mindset with staying informed on not only the property itself, but also current market trends, real estate news. Act as if you were an advisor to your clients, not just trying to get the sale. And with that, and with being, a truthful educator, of course, because we know how important that is, you're building credibility as you go along. So I always feel that by building that credibility and by acting as more of a consultant, as more of an advisor, strong sales performance should come as a byproduct to that. And then, of course, right now, as a lot of you know who are actively, in the sales market and our brokers, there's crazy conventional loan offerings right now that go as low as 3 to 5% down. Of course, there's the FHA financing option for first-time home buyers, usually 3 to 3.5% down for FHA. USDA loans, if you have clients that would qualify for a USDA loan, you can go as low as 0%. VA loans also 0%. Of course, as I mentioned, the conventional 97 at 3% down for a conventional loan. And there's also a lot of FHA down payment assistance programs as well, which a lot of people don't even know about. So I actually found a statistic on the mortgagereports.com, 87% of all single family homes in the United States potentially qualify for these FHA down payment assistance programs. So, and the average home buyer using down payment assistance receives $11,565, and that's on average. So they are actually more available than you might think, but they're seldom used, and a lot of that's just because your clients just simply don't know about it. So it's your role as educators to inform them more well-roundedly of, here's the situation, and that's great, and I'm going to of course help you find that rental, but have you thought of buying, and these are some alternatives that you can consider.
Real quick, Michael, about the low credit scores, right? Which works really well, whether they do want to keep renting or they want to buy, is a lot of HUD counseling agencies will do credit counseling for free for your clients, and they register you as their agent. And so once they've gone through the credit counseling and the credit has gotten improved, they send them back to you as the agent. So it's really, really a nice way to partner with it. So if you haven't investigated into that, look into different IDA programs, look into your HUD counseling agencies in your neighborhood or just in the city in general, and start forging those relationships. It's about being that educator, like Michael said, and having those resources, whether or not that client you're working with needs them. It's good to know. It's good that they know that you have those in your back pocket, because you never know who that they might know that could take advantage of those programs.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Next up, we have the pre-qualification process, which the initial consultation, especially, we talk about, with our leasing agents, that initial pre-qualification, or otherwise the initial consultation with your client, usually starts the same way as it does with a buyer, right? Find out what they're looking for, where they want to live, what size house or apartment or condo they're looking for, how much they're looking to spend, and all that good stuff. So once we get past what their goals are, where they want to live, how much house they're looking for, and what they want to spend per month, it then comes time to get down to the financial brass tacks, if you will, right? How much are you looking to spend per month? But this is also how much do you want to spend versus how much you can afford to spend. So this is an important factor, because although we might be used to our clients trying to overextend themselves, a lot of times we also have clients that underestimate themselves as well. And again, we never want to push people outside their comfort zone, but a lot of people just don't know, or once they kind of go through their income, you might be able to identify like, oh, well, you actually are in a category of somebody that can afford to spend a little bit more, right? And then, of course, what's their credit situation? You have to, do they have credit challenges? And if so, are those credit challenges related to housing and are contributing, and are they the contributing factors that are driving the score down? So when we talk about, what are those marks for, housing related credit challenges, usually utility collections or evictions or foreclosures and things like that. But if they're on the other side of the spectrum and they have stellar credit, and they tell you, oh, I'm in the upper 700s, low 800s. Not only are you pre-qualifying them for the rental, because usually with rentals is a much more binary. Either they're likely to get approved or they're likely to get denied. But when they're going through their credit history with you, you could also be looking at it from the lens of, okay, well, they have near perfect credit. Like, just imagine the interest rate that they could potentially get on a mortgage loan, and then you can start kind of building that conversation from there about potentially purchasing. Gross income, right? Obviously important. 3 times the monthly rent on gross income, but also look at that in comparison to, well, how much rent are they willing to spend, and based on the type of housing that they're looking for, perhaps that would be totally the same or even less if you look at what a monthly payment might look like for a similar unit if they were to buy it. And then, of course, although typically landlords, right, look for 3 times the monthly rent, you can ask your client, do you feel financially prepared, if you weren't making that same income, to continue on the monthly budgeted amount. So basically, if something happens to your income and, you have a job change where you're not making the same or you're changing careers or whatever the case is, could you still carry that payment? And essentially when asking this question, you're also it's a roundabout way of asking, well, how much do you have in the bank, right? Because if you have a client that tells you, oh, well, yeah, I should be fine. I've been saving up a lot. I have 20, 30, $40,000 in the bank. That should definitely set off, an alarm in your head of like, oh, okay, well, let's start prying just a little bit further. And if you have $40,000 in the bank, what is preventing you from buying? What is preventing you from, using that to invest in property and come up with with a down payment and closing costs? So make sure, and I stress this with our agents all the time in the rental division, make sure that you're really putting the point across that you are their partner in all things real estate. Your goal is to make sure that your clients feel financially stable in their living situation. So, it's obviously your goal is to find them a great place to call home, but also that, they're going to be financially comfortable as well. You're not there to stretch their budget or pressure them into a housing situation that's beyond their means. So it's really important to to make that point and to really get that across that yeah, you called me on this rental, you called me on this lease, thanks so much for your interest, but I am a real estate broker. I want to be your partner moving forward in whichever path that you decide to go down. And then after the pre-qualification conversation, if they gave you any indication that they might financially make that next step into venturing into the purchase world, then what's the harm in simply asking, the question, have you considered buying? Because based on what you're telling me, right, you might be in a good position to buy right now, even though it's something that you might not have thought of, which then, of course, leads into chatting about the benefits and how they might actually be saving money every month, depending on the type of housing that they're looking for. So, it starts with just simply asking that question, right? And it's one of those things where I feel like a lot of agents get kind of stuck on that, or they think very kind of one track of like, oh, well, this person called me, on this property, this must be what they want to talk about. And again, when we talk about that initial conversation, and we always tell the agents on the rental side, well, you really want that initial, consultation to be 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most, and maybe less, maybe more, depending on how the conversation is going on the other side, right? But so I'm not saying that this is a one size fits all solution for everyone, but at the same time, if you feel that the conversation is more along the lines where either they're not really too sure what they're looking for, or they're really looking for more of an advisor versus just somebody that's going to open the door for them on the particular apartment that they called for, or whatever the situation might be with one of your referrals or whatnot, see that opportunity through, because that one lead on that one rental property might turn into something a lot bigger than you thought that it would.
And to add to that, Michael, one of the questions that I ask a lot during that pre-qualification, whether it's a renter or a buyer, but especially if it is a renter, especially if it's a renter looking at that 1,800 plus a month, is I ask them, is this your 1 year, 2 year, 3 year plus plan? Like, how long are you planning on staying in the space? Yeah. And for buyers, I always ask them, is this your 3 year, 5 year, 7 year plan? And with renters, the reason why I don't say 3 or 5 years, 7 years, because if you ask a renter, are you planning on staying here for 7 years? They're going to be like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But if you ask a renter, are you planning on staying here more than a year? Like, are you looking for a space that you can rent and live in for a couple of years? Let's say under 5, but more than 1. And you're looking to spend $2,000 a month in that. Then you can say, if you'd allow me, I'd like to actually chat with you about the benefits of buying. And before you shirk off, I just got, my job as my fiduciary duty as an agent is to be your partner, to kind of explain to you just the process. And if you're telling me right now that you're willing to spend $2,000 to $2,500 a month for potentially 5 years in a 2-bed, 1-bath in Lincoln Park, let me just talk to you about what that could get you in equity if you bought something. And even if you did move in 5 years, like this is what we could look at, does that kind of change your mind? How do you think about that? Right. So I think sometimes as realtors, we get really caught up in the initial ask of why someone's looking for our business. I'm calling you because I'm looking to rent. I'm calling you because I'm looking to buy. I'm calling you because I'm looking to list. And we forget that there's 1,000,005 different ways to have a real estate transaction. And if we pigeonhole ourselves to only being able to help them with what they're originally calling to ask, they might not see us as the person able to help them with anything beyond that. So with a renter, especially if you're on this call and you have a sales license, not just a leasing license. With a renter, of course, you're going to help them with the rental. But if you never talk about sales with them, if you never start broaching the fact that you can also help sales, it might not cross that renter's mind that that's something you can do, because a lot of renters don't see that equal, right? They don't understand that. I mean, a lot of consumers just don't get what we do, right? They think we open doors. So it's our job to kind of express that to them. So work it into your conversation early on by asking those questions that Michael just talked about, and ask them what their plans are. Because if they're like, oh no, I'm definitely going to be this in only a year. Oh, really? So what are you kind of looking to do after a year? And if they tell you, well, I'm trying to get out, or I'm trying to save to buy. Oh, interesting. So if you're trying to save to buy, let me ask you, how would you feel about sacrificing having laundry in units and maybe like the perfect neighborhood so I could get you in something a little bit less expensive so you could save a little bit more, because I know how important that might be in order for you to cover closing costs. I'm not sure if you know the full way of how to buy a property. Even just that little nugget of information can set you up to be that real estate partner in a year when they go to buy.
Right.
Go ahead, Michael.
No,
Sorry.
no, absolutely. And here's the thing, like what Rachel mentioned is basically you're setting up a call to action on like what their future plan is. So already you're laying the groundwork of a long-term relationship. It's not just, hey, let me find you, what you asked for, and hopefully, right, I'll open the door for you and maybe you'll fill out an application, or maybe not, and we'll move on. But instead it's like, oh, hey, here's your 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 year plan, right? If you want to say, let's actually, knock the budget down a little bit, which, by the way, that point alone that Rachel just made, a lot of brokers wouldn't even think to do that, right? And a lot of clients will be caught off guard because they'll be like, oh, wait, you want to take my budget down? Like, don't you get paid on commission? Like, that's interesting, right? But what you're doing is you're laying the groundwork for that long-term relationship, because then, what a perfect excuse that's going to be a few months out from when their lease expires to call them up and say, oh, hey, remember, how's the savings been coming along? Are you ready to take that next step? So no, excellent point.
And I guarantee you, sorry to interrupt, but I guarantee you they're going to forget about closing costs, because when I went to go buy my own property, I forgot about closing costs, and I had already been selling real estate for 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, what is this ridiculous amount of money I have to pay? And like, I had no excuse. So I guarantee you most buyers or most renters, when they're thinking about buying, they're thinking, I would even argue my best friends, they always think 20%. Very, very few people understand lower than 20. And hardly anybody understands the concept of closing costs. So even just being able to add that little nugget of information, that's going to be the reason that you call them every month. That's going to be the reason that they're going to remember you. Like, this person wasn't invested in getting me in the most expensive rental so they could get paid a higher commission. They were investing in helping me live a better future and eventually buying a property I could call my own.
Mm-hmm. It's all about setting yourself, apart from the rest of the pack. And a lot of, absolutely right, a lot of realtors just don't think to ask those questions. So of course, that all being said, right, it's all about what are the right questions to ask, right? So this is where we try to kind of get down to the nitty gritty without being too pressuring, but mostly just rounding them out, as people, so you can properly advise them on what those next steps to take, further. So to find out, number one, have you ever considered purchasing versus renting? Going back to just ask the question, has this ever been an option for you? Or have you owned a home before, or would you be a first-time home buyer? tell me, as you're getting to know them as a human being, like that's kind of a fundamental question that'll also help guide you, along the way of, well, what are those future plans, right? Question number two that I would ask, well, what's stopping you? You can even go a step further. What are you afraid of, right? What's stopping you from buying a home? What are your biggest motivating factors for renting right now? Is it, simply inexperience, and don't be afraid to say it, right? Is it a little bit of ignorance, or is it a life situation, that's causing you to rent versus buy, and depending on what they say, of course, you're going to run into the clients that are like, oh, well, I'm just in Chicago, for a year, or it's very short term, or I'm relocating for work, or I don't know if I want to invest in this market, right? And then again, that's what's setting you up for kind of what that long-term plan is going to look like, depending on, what those might be for that particular individual. But if you come across somebody that's, oh, well, I've lived here my whole life, but I don't want to commit, or I've just been comfortable renting, or, for whatever reason, I don't want to be responsible for home ownership. That's something to where, maybe we can dig a little bit further and actually find out, what are those pain points, and how can I help relieve them, or how can I help educate this person into, this might be a better option for you. And as most of you know, most of the time, yes, it will be a better option for them in the long run, especially. And then, of course, the third question here, did you know in many cases, right, this is a lot of times the magic question, right? Did you know in many cases your monthly mortgage payment is cheaper, than your rent? A lot of people are just in that mindset of, renting equals cheaper, buying equals, more expensive. But, and sure, maybe in the immediate short term, like Rachel mentioned, with closing costs and coming up with a down payment, and, sure, you have to come up with a decent amount of money to move forward on a purchase than you would on a rental. Although I will say, and for those of you, who have done, rentals, especially in condo buildings, recently or otherwise, we all know the buildings, right? Where it's like, oh, you have to pay a security deposit to the owner, and you have to pay first month's rent, and then you have to pay a $500 move-in fee to the building, and then you have to pay this rush fee for the elevator and a pet fee. By the time everything, and if it's a 3,000 plus rental, right? And all of a sudden we have somebody that's, almost 10 grand, almost 10 grand of money that they have to pay just to move into a rental. So those kinds of situations, it's always just been like a huge, like, a red flag to us of like, what, what's the story here? Like at this rate, you're paying this, crazy amount of money right up front when you can be applying it to your down payment or closing costs. So, definitely in situations like that, those are situations that you're really going to want to take advantage of for sure. So, again, go ahead and ask that magic question. Did you know in many cases your mortgage payment could be cheaper than paying rent? And of course, it's going to be your investment at the end of the day. It's not going into your landlord's pocket. And if based on the information revealed in the initial consultation that it will be in fact cheaper, then use that data to help you along with that particular pitch. So, an example that, that I like to give, or, let's just say it's somebody that says that they're looking for a 2-bed, 2-bath unit to rent, right? So that 2-bed, 2-bath, they're looking maybe around like the $2,400, $2,500 price range. Well, if you do the math on what that would look like in the purchase world, it's really, I simply just did this super quickly. If it's around a $375,000, and I'm being conservative with those numbers, it's around $375,000 on a purchase price, and that's factoring in a 5% conventional mortgage, around $300 for your HOA dues, about $3,500 or so for the taxes, which is kind of typical in Chicago condos. Of course, because we only put 5% down, we have to factor in the PMI, your homeowner's insurance, and a 3%. And again, it's not unheard of to get around a 3% interest rate right now. You could be looking at 23, that payment comes out to $2,325. So they started out as a $2,400 or $2,500 2-bed, 2-bath. Well, actually, we can get a fairly, a pretty nice 2-bed, 2-bath, right, for $375, and it's yours, and you're actually paying less in your monthly payment than you would otherwise. So literally just sitting there and doing the math with your client. And we used to have agents that would do this, like on that, especially when we had those initial consultations, and we would sit them down across from us, right? Whenever, hopefully we get back to that again sometime soon, but we would literally go through, okay, great, you're looking $2,500. Well, let's just play with some numbers and see, because I know that interest rates are really good right now, and you told me that you have a really good credit score. So let's just kind of see what that monthly payment might look like if purchasing might be an option that you're looking for. So asking the right questions, vitally important, of course. So going forward from there, then of course we talk about long-term client management. So after all those wonderful points that you just made to your lead of somebody that's looking to rent an apartment, let's say they dig their heels in the sand, right, and they stick with renting. Okay, great, no problem. But just because they aren't ready to become homeowners yet, doesn't mean they won't be ready next year or the year after that or that. So what do we do to follow up with that client and just discover what that long-term plan is. Well, of course, again, it's all about follow-up, right? I've stressed in my almost 10 years, in the business, this is something that's stayed the same no matter what market that we're in. Renter leads should not be looked at in a one-time transactional way, period. You'd be stunned to know, unfortunately, how many times I've witnessed agents, rent an apartment to somebody and never follow up with them again, or even more of a common situation that they don't find them a place, and then they just act like, they say, oh, you're dead to me, right? They cease to exist after that, So it looks like a few of you, and I know, Tom, I'm looking at you, you probably remember some of the old, Chicago Apartment Finders days with me, right? Where literally, we had the old fashioned lead sheets that we would pass out to our renters, we would pass out to our agents. I've literally witnessed an agent that would rip up that sheet if they had a bad experience with their client and they didn't rent with them, or they gave them a hard time, or whatever the case might be. So follow up with them anyway, not just because of a referral basis, but also to remind them that you can rent an apartment next time around, or just a simple, hey, congratulations on your new rental, let's chat when it's time to rent again, or especially let's chat when it's time to buy, right? Most renters might be one lease or two away from becoming first-time home buyers. So, don't forget about them, after they sign their lease, which, speaking of, a lot of renters, especially the younger, millennial, our lovely millennial and Gen Z demographics, they might still be in school, or maybe they just started, they just graduated, or they just started considering buying. They're not quite there yet, but a lot of those individuals are going to be only one or two leases away from taking the plunge into homeownership. So don't give up. Just especially if you identify with people in that particular age range, you kind of know what that looks like. If they're graduating college, early 20s, and they're still going to be renting in the neighborhoods of Chicago in their mid 20s, and maybe starting in late 20s they want to make that investment into a condo there, or they've already started to find somebody to get married, whatever the case might be. Stick along with them, and I have there's a lot of examples too, again, just from my experience over the years of watching, agents that, would really, they saw that from the get-go, where other brokers might look at those clients and be like, that seems like kind of a lot to handle. We have students and 3 or 4 co-signers, right? And, it seems like just kind of a lot to put that together. Well, if you're going to be in the business for a while, look at 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because they're not going to be renters forever. They're going to buy, and who's going to be there with them to buy when the time comes? It's going to be the agent that, followed up with them. So don't ever forget that, for sure. And then, of course, we talk about the points of contact after you rent somebody a place. So you want to do that initial contact right after they move in, midway through their lease, and 90 days out from lease expiration at a minimum, to explore their options. And I would actually refer to these as the minimum 3 points of contact after you successfully rent to your client. I would say first, again, maybe after the move in, it's a nice text or a phone call. Hey, just, congratulations again. I hope you're settling into your new home, nicely. It was such a pleasure working with you. Let me know if there's anything that I can do. And then, of course, there's a midway point, right? The midway point of how are things going, and like we talked about before, hopefully you've laid that groundwork of, especially if they're saving to maybe buy, or they were starting to, have that conversation, but they're not quite there yet. that's the time to bring that up again, and also set up the plan for following up closer to when their lease expires. Of, oh, by the way, expect a phone call from me, because typically that process of buying, we want to give ourselves enough time. We want to give ourselves, even though we can close in like 30 to 40 days, right? We want to give ourselves at least 60 to 90 days, if not more than that, to really start that discovery process, take our time, have you get pre-approved for your loan, and take those next steps forward, to secure a purchase. So you're setting up that final point of contact. Again, I would say 90 to 120 days even, and some agents, of course, have their own kind of timeline that they follow, but at a minimum of when their lease expires to when you're going to want to make that final touch point. And then, of course, if they are established renters and they keep telling you that they're renting, then of course you should follow up with them again at least 60 days out from the end of their lease to find another rental. But that's definitely a good time frame to kind of get that process started for sure. Rachel, does that was that appropriate in your view? You think of enough time, 90 to 120 days or so out from when their lease expires?
Yeah, I definitely think. Oh, sorry, I'm having a little bit of an echo. There we go. I definitely think that that's an appropriate amount of time for when the lease ends. Like you said, though, I think follow-up is so key to continue throughout the relationship with them. We have such great tools here at Coldwell Banker with the Prospect Square Clients for Life, something you can continually keep in touch with them on. Also, if it's a renter, I highly recommend looping in one of our fabulous guaranteed rate affinity lenders to do some branding with you. So if you have a pool of renters or even just friends and family, and I'm a big believer in farming and mailing out to your sphere, as Michael knows, and if you guys have been on any of my calls before, I really recommend sending out mailers to them every month and co-brand it with one of your lenders, and they'll help pay for it, and just keep reminding them of these different options. I see somebody put in the chat that sometimes lenders will give credits to buyers. That is a very big sometimes, so don't take this in the chat and think that it's an always. I also like to point out with GRA, this is something really good for you guys to know, and I didn't know this either, but they give preferential treatment to Coldwell Banker clients. So they actually put you guys at the front, your clients at the front of the line. So they put you in front of all of the different refinances and everything else like that. So your clients truly do get the white glove concierge treatment with guaranteed rate affinity, plus they're in-house. So it's very, very easy to call that lender up or pop by their desk. So I really recommend that. But yeah, typically per the RLTO, as you know, Michael, tenants really need to give about 30, 60 days notice, no matter what, if they're going to move. The fastest I've ever closed on a condo was 35 business days, or 35 days total, and that was like a perfect situation. Nothing was wrong with the inspection. I got all the condo docs right away. But typically most lenders will tell you they like a 45-day close, and if you anticipate in the market we're having right now, many parts of the city, it's a little bit slower. It's a little bit more of a buyer's choice right now, a little bit less of a seller's market. So you could reasonably find something in a couple weeks, but really that 120 days is a really good indicator of just what's going on. Now more than ever, I really encourage you guys to reach out to any renter you have that's about 6 months out from their lease and just ask them, how are things going? Like, how has your company pivoted during stay-at-home order? You might have rented something to a studio to somebody who now has to permanently work from home, and they're thinking about, I need a 1-bedroom, and maybe they're willing to buy that 1-bedroom right now, or hell, maybe they're willing to buy a 2-bedroom right now because they started dating someone and they're going to move in together. I mean, you just don't know where people are thinking right now. So I know we have a lot of, I've talked to a lot of agents who have people have roommates and things like that, and they're some roommates have to work from home, so they're looking for places by themselves. So you have a really great excuse to check in on them, ask how their company has pivoted and is handling things, and maybe they need that space. I think previously, a lot of people rented and purchased property based on lifestyle outside of the home. I want somewhere I can walk to coffee, and I want to be able to stay out till a 4 a.m. bar and walk home. I want to be able to go walk on the beach every weekend, whatever it is. And so people made a lot of, they made a lot of, I don't need a huge living room. I don't care about having a dining room table or, whatever it was. I'm okay having a full bed because I'm just here to eat and sleep. And now I think people are looking for a lifestyle inside the home.
Yeah.
Those units because you rented them to those clients. You know what their living conditions are. So look back to your last 2 years of clients you've helped into rentals. Think about those spaces and think about how they might not be conducive to a stay-at-home lifestyle and how you might be able to help identify a space that will work for them now.
Yeah. Perfect point. It's a great opportunity for a quote unquote, care call into your clients, right? How are you doing with everything going on? How, just to check in with them as people, right? But also, Rachel's right. If, somebody living in a studio right now downtown, maybe that's not where they want to be anymore, right? So that's a perfect, that's a perfect excuse, and it's not an excuse, right? Because you're calling them to check in, but also, yeah, I mean, it's a perfect way to kind of interject in the conversation. Hey, what's the situation now? Are you working from home? Do you need more space? Do you need a home office, etc. So,
and Michael, sorry to interrupt, but I know a really good lead-in, you guys, if you don't want to feel too awkward, a really good lead-in is, hey, I was talking to one of my other clients who's also in a studio in the Gold Coast, and it made me think about you. And they were saying about how when they were looking, they were really looking to be in a spot with like a great view, blah, blah, blah. But now how with working from home, things have kind of changed what they're looking for. And it just really made me want to call you, check in and see how you're doing and just see if like that, kind of like cheat. And, maybe don't lie, call a friend so you don't feel like you're lying and talk with somebody first, but it doesn't have to feel like you're calling them out of the blue. Do something so you don't feel like you're fibbing, call somebody else that feels like, yes, this triggered me to call you and think about you, especially if it has been somebody you haven't talked to in 6 to 8 months. At the end of the day, it shouldn't be a scary thing to talk to somebody that's used you in the past. There's really easy ways to kind of get around that fear. A very simple one is, I was just thinking about you. I drove by your building and it made me realize I haven't connected with you in a few months and it's been a crazy year. And if this year has taught me anything, it's how important it is to check in on everybody. So just how the heck are you? How's the unit working out for you? How's your job situation? Be prepared for some misery. Okay. But, be that empathetic ear and be that person that's ready to help them.
Yeah. No, perfect. And also, of course, perfect lead into our next slide here, focusing on the relationship, right? A good one for that, Rachel, for sure. Yeah, because that's what it is, right? And this, I know that this is a theme, that you've noticed throughout the hour here so far, but get to know them as people, right? They're not dollar signs. They're not singular transactions. They're human beings. This will help you also determine where they are along the way in their, life journey, so to speak, right? What are those long-term plans? Are they transplants? Are they lifelong Chicagoans? Are they planning on staying in their preferred rental? And, and again, perfect point with COVID, right? This is, what a great point to apply to this of, their rental a year ago is not where they want to be, right now, or a different area, right? I mean, again, I'm not to be too alarmist, but we keep kind of seeing these articles pop up about this, this downtown, I hesitate to call it exodus, right? But, there's movement there. There's movement of people from downtown to further out neighborhoods or suburbs or whatever the case is. Are your clients in that category, or are they just trying to, stay downtown but get something maybe a little bit bigger? And then, of course, what stage of life are they in? And I know I talked about this earlier, as well, but are they in college, recent grads? Are they getting married? Are they having kids? Are they relocating? This, especially as you get people in more of those transitional ages where it's like, it's a great way to kind of touch base. How's everything been? Oh, hey, by the way, I just got engaged. Oh, wow, congratulations. So you guys moving in together? Are you looking for a bigger place? Like, what's the story? So focusing on the relationship will help you determine, what stage in life they are and what housing kind of goes along with what stage with what stage they're in. So of course, and this is synonymous across all of real estate, right? Asking for the referral. Don't forget. I'm hoping as realtors out there, you've all done this once or twice, right? Especially when you just sell a house. Hey, make sure you refer me your family or friends. But when talking to renter leads, it's also a matter of mentioning, hey, by the way, I'm also a licensed realtor as well. I sell homes. I sell great places to find to buy. Maybe this will lead to you'd be surprised how the stories I've heard of the $800 to $1,000 studio leads that might say something, oh, hey, by the way, my parents are actually like selling their house in the suburbs and buying a condo in the city, or by the way, even the crown jewel of maybe they're going to buy, we were talking about buying me a condo instead of co-signing on this rental for me. They want to invest in property, so I'm going to actually rent for my parents instead of finding another rental. So that's a conversion of what you thought was kind of an entry level apartment turning into, oh, really? Great, like you sell too? Well, fantastic. Like I've been looking for somebody to help me with that. So make sure you talk yourself up a little bit. Your brokers, you've earned that right, and this is just a matter of expanding on your business and talk about what you do on the sales side and the transactions and whatnot, just like you would for somebody who's buying. Just because they're renting doesn't mean they're not interested in hearing about that, or they have somebody in their sphere or somebody in their life that would benefit from your services 100%. So always ask for the referral.
And on top of that, ask for the referral, you guys. Ask for the review. Is that your next slide, Michael?
No, but that's a great
okay.
Yeah.
Ask for the review. So I used to make this, and we're going to actually have a coaching session on this in our next 3-month launch pad. So I'm so excited. So this will give you a little teaser, but I used to follow that mantra of ask for a review like a week after closing, because I was taught sort of by old school mindset of, they're so busy at the closing, they're so busy moving in, get them on the high after they've moved in and they're settled, they're so happy, ask them for that review. And I recently read this phenomenal article in Inman about how asking for a review should be part of your start to finish process with a buyer, seller, it doesn't matter who, a renter. And I thought that was so interesting. And so kind of weave it in. So for example, all of you guys out there, whether if you've worked with a client before, sometimes they'll say, oh my gosh, that's so great. Like, thank you so much. Like, you're so awesome. And then you can just kind of throw them a wink and be like, can't wait to read that in my review. You just kind of subtly work in this point that you're going to ask them for a review, no matter what it is. If you're helping them rent, buy, sell, invest, that's so important. And you can encourage renters to write a review that's more about how you guided them and about your character, and not so heavily focused on the fact you rented. So if you're a sales agent specifically, let's say, and you don't want to necessarily be pegged as a rental agent, not that there's anything wrong with that, obviously, you can help guide them and be like, I would love for you to write a review that really focused on how I educated you through the process and how you really felt my service was. Use those key words, because then they're going to type those words in your review. And think about what it is that when you read reviews really inspires you to go to that restaurant or try that boutique store out or whatever it is. Think about that. But we're moving into a review-based culture. We've already been there to an extent, and I see real estate really going into that way. I mean, Zillow is already very much based on reviews. And if you look at how web platforms are based, kind of getting into that like nerdy weeds, but looking at real estate 10 years from now, which is what you guys should all be doing, right? Because you all want to be in real estate 10 years from now. Those platforms 10 years ago, we laughed and we're like, ha ha ha, no one's going to ever look at Zillow to price their property. Are you kidding? And now everyone and their mother tells you what their home is worth because Zillow told them that. So think about that and start building those reviews in now as part of that referral process. If they leave you a review, they will give you a referral. So think of those two R's like synonymously.
Yep.
Sorry,
No,
Michael, to
perfect
derail
point.
us a little.
Of course, no, perfect point. But yeah, so some helpful stats as we finish up here. So when looking at first-time home buyers, right? They represent 34% of all of the market of people buying homes right now. So about a third. And what were they doing before, right? They were probably renting. So it just kind of goes to show you that it's a huge market that always should be kind of front and center, and especially for those of you focusing on rentals, that's your demographic. And of course, another huge rental demographic, as we all know, who doesn't love our millennials, right? 74% of all millennials, they're looking to buy within the next 5 years, which millennial generation, you may have heard that they kind of had that late, I don't know about that, but they kind of had that late start into it. People were saying, oh, are they ever going to buy houses? Are they ever going to grow up? Are they ever going to do this or that? Right. Well, they're starting.
Listen, if we didn't have to inherit the worst economy in the history of the world, I'm just kidding.
Right. Yeah, cut us a break, right? Yeah, for sure. But but yeah, so just again, the next time you talk to somebody in that age group that is still in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're still renting, again, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like, hey, are you going to be included in that mix anytime soon? Because the statistics say that they most likely are. And then of course, last but not least, don't forget to mention these rates, everyone. I mean, you've heard it, before. Obviously, 2020 has been a year of historic proportion for a lot of different reasons, but with that comes along the historically low interest rates. So, they're still hovering around 3%. Some cases even lower than 3%. I'm not sure if anybody on the call remembers the last time that may have been the case, but obviously these rates put homeownership more in the reach of more people than ever before. So I know, Rachel, we set a closing record how many weeks back of Coldwell Banker. Like in the history of Coldwell Banker, we did more closings in that 1 week than ever before.
I think it was like the second or third week of August, which frankly, you guys, is a direct result of all of you and all of your hard work through the stay-at-home order, because
right.
Closing in August was everyone's hard work for April and May, frankly, going under contract in May, and June, which was calling people in April. So It was crazy. It's the biggest in our local operating company, and I think nationally as well.
Yeah. That's crazy. And the market, that clearly means the market is speaking for itself, and people are getting in on the action. I mean, and again, when you're doing those monthly budget calculations, and again, if they're telling you, hey, my credit score is approaching 800 or whatever the case is, chances are, I know it's more than just that, but they might get around that 3% or even the sub 3% level. So that's going to mean a lot when it comes to what that monthly budget's going to be. So don't forget to, not most people are going to know, hopefully even renters, unless they're living under a rock. But again, some people you'd be surprised. So don't forget to mention it. And that's that. Thank you all. And any questions that you have for me, we have about 8 minutes left or so. So please, and let me actually switch over so I can see the chat here.
Thank you so much, Michael. I've been keeping an eye on it, and I wanted to chat about, Ricardo made a comment, and I think, Ricardo, if you want to unmute yourself, I think you meant to say that rent may be more expensive, or that, what was it that you're trying to say there? I just want to make sure I'm getting that correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at, and so yeah, I think that would basically, and Ricardo, feel free to interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're saying that because of a lot of, and let's chat about this for a couple of minutes, when it comes to a lot of these rent concessions and really, these slashing of rent prices, especially in buildings downtown, that philosophy that renting actually might be cheaper than buying for that particular market. But let's remember that, if that's happening to those buildings downtown on the rental side, it's also happening in the condo market as well. So I know a lot of units, in River North and Streeterville and the Loop, of course, South Loop especially, that's been sitting on the market for a very long time, that we have very, motivated sellers. So if somebody does want, to be in those areas, yeah, sure. The rental concessions and and what buildings will try to offer tenants to move in, 2 months free rent, or, we'll give you a $500 gift card, or whatever the case is. Great, but also kind of short term, right? When we can actually knock off 20-30,000 off of a condo unit that otherwise would be, more than that, but people want to take advantage of that situation and invest in downtown, because downtown's going to be back eventually, right? So if it depends on if it's more of a short term or a long term gain. If your renter wants to live downtown regardless, then why not, put an offer on a condo that's been sitting on the market for 4 months now, and see what happens there. And then you have a long-term investment, and hopefully in 10 years, hopefully maybe even less, if they want to sell that place, then they're going to actually get a good return on it, and they're not going to get that from concessions or rent reductions. So that would be
yeah, that's such a good point, Michael. And the other part is we are facing historically low availability of affordable housing in Chicago. So we actually have a shortage of apartments available, to be honest. And so what I am seeing in slashing of prices also is contributing to that. Like, unfortunately, we are in a health crisis that is causing economic crisis as well. Unlike 2008 and 9, which was truly an economic crisis, right? We are in a pandemic. So it is a health crisis, nothing rooted in economy, but it's bleeding out into those areas. And frankly, those were areas that already still were struggling to recover, right? We before this happened, believe me, because I'm very involved with the Realtor Political Action Committee for CAR, we were already struggling with affordable and fair housing in Chicago before the pandemic. So what we were seeing is a couple of years ago, a huge demand for rentals, a lot of buildings deconverted, a lot of condo buildings were like, man, the rental demand is super high. I'm going to deconvert. I'm going to rent out all these units. And they were very, very successful in doing that. But now we have a very overly saturated rental market, particularly in those higher end buildings that frankly, a lot of the tenants that could afford to buy in those, rent in those, realized these rates are 2.8 for what I'm paying in rent. I can buy myself a nice house with a yard in the suburbs. I have to work from home anyway, so I think that's what we're kind of seeing because of this health crisis. I think if we weren't in midst of the pandemic, we would have kept seeing the same trend of condo buildings deconverting, going to rentals, and seeing that heavily saturated, with Google coming here, with a lot of corporations moving their bases into the city itself, with a lot more young professionals seeking those higher end rentals. That's what we would have seen. Buildings like NEMA, where a lot of tenants don't actually never really wanted to leave their buildings. Now they can't, which is very ironic, twist of fate. But they wanted everything in house, and now we're seeing a slight shift that frankly no one in the world saw coming. So we might see this overcorrection right now, where yes, a lot of rental buildings are having to make a lot of concessions. Small landlords, big buildings, everybody across the board is having to make quick adjustments because of what's happening. But I think when we settle and the dust settles, and who knows when that's going to be, eventually things kind of go back. Pendulums swing. We saw that in 2008 and 9, and then look what happened in 15 and 16 and 17. I mean, things were going 50K over asking price, which is ludicrous. Like, that's not a healthy market either. So we're just kind of in a pendulum swing, but I think we'll start to equate. Michael, would you kind of agree with that a little bit?
100%, 100%. It's all about that balance. And, again, it's, that nobody saw this coming, and these are what the demands of the market are right now in this moment, and what could be for the next, even if it's 6 months, year, whatever the case might be. But again, I mean, it's all relative. So I mean, if you're, it comes down to the commitment that people are willing to make, and if they're in that stage of life where it's like, I'm going to stay here for a while, I'm going to hunker down, and I'm gonna, purchase this property, and again, or they're in the other stage where it's, hey, I kind of want to leave, right? And I'm ready to like move out, and I'm ready, great, and that's fine too. So I mean, it's really kind of trying to identify that, and there's no better conversation starter than everything going on and kind of what it means for them and what it means for what they're looking for in terms of housing. No, absolutely. Dylan's saying, yeah, and some lenders, yeah, are giving credit. Dylan's lender that he works with gives $1,500 credit to buyers. So yeah, I mean, if you have hookups like that, for sure, that can help with the closing costs and what those initial in people's minds, oh God, I'm gonna have to come up with all this money to close on a house. And sure, and either people have that money or they don't. But if they don't, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an automatic no, that it's like, no, you can't buy. Sorry. No, I mean, there's definitely, as I mentioned before, there's a lot more assistance, either through lender credits, but also just, government assistance and different housing program assistance that people have at the available that they're just not taking advantage of right now. And Helena's interested in HUD IDA resources. Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely get some.
Just Google HUD, find those local places. It's very, very easy to find HUD.gov. You can find the local. And yeah, like Jerry earlier in the chat commented that he's really good at counseling his buyers to get their closing costs covered by the seller, which is always something really interesting to have in your back pocket. And Dylan then, talked about the pros and cons of that, right? So if you have a seller or a buyer, that doesn't have a lot of cash necessary to buy. So maybe they're able to put the 5% down, but they can't afford like the extra 2% that they need to have for the closing cost credit. You can ask for the seller to cover that. Just know that when the seller covers the closing costs of a buyer, it's lessening the seller's net. Yeah. So their take home. So if I write a $300,000 offer, but I'm asking the seller to cover $2,000 closing costs, I'm really writing an offer for $298,000, right? So a lot of times you have to go a little higher in the purchase price to make the seller feel like it's worth them giving up some of their take home. But what's good to counsel your buyer with, and this is why having a strong lender is so important, especially with buyers that are a little more cash strapped, is sometimes that like $1,000, $2,000 is only $25 a month on a 30-year mortgage. Like it could be peanuts a month, What seems like a lump sum coming out of my bank account to close next month over a 30-year period could be my Starbucks for the month, So that's why it's so important to make sure that you're partnered with a good lender and that you can educate your buyer fully and your renter when you're talking about that, because there are really, really good options, but you just want to make sure you explain this correctly. And if you have the seller and you're receiving an offer like that, you want to be able to break it down for your seller so that they understand what their take home is and how this might be different. You can negotiate properly because of that. But it is a really, really great option, especially for those buyers that are a little bit more cash strapped.
For sure.
I don't see anything else really in the chat, and now we're at 3:01. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Michael, for teaching.
Thanks for having me.
So
appreciate
great.
It. Yeah, no, absolutely. And really quick, Denny has a seller purchase with Section 8 assistance. She wants to sell in a year from now as per terms of Section 8. Not familiar with Section 8 as it pertains to home loans. Anyone have any info on type of transaction? Interesting. Section 8 with home loans, definitely not my area of expertise on that. I know, of course, with them as it pertains to tenants. Rachel, any thought on that for Denny's comment?
Denny, I'm going to put Robin Barron's information in the chat, but she's with GRA Affinity, and so I would reach out to her.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you all again so much. As I put up there, and let me actually share really quick again. Here's my information. Feel free, of course, as always, call me, text me, email me. I'm always happy to chat about this, converting renters to buyers or anything else, chatting about the rental division in general. And yeah, thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Thank you so much, Michael. Bye, everybody. Stay safe. Come visit us if you want in the office, but wear your mask.
Of course. Thank you, everyone. Take care.